Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to Migweek. Thanks for tuning in again. We really hope you've enjoyed it so far as much as we have. It's been fantastic. Yeah, really just enjoyed sort of engaging with our wider community this week. We were just talking before we started about what a wonderful kind of community vibe and how positive it's been just walking around and birding and just yeah, us all kind of in it together, which has been the whole point of this, basically. You know, keeping us joined up and keeping us moving forward and keeping us enjoying our migration and our birds and our wider community. So a couple of things before we get started with tonight's talk. Sorry to repeat myself, folks, but we've got a little survey in the chat box at the side of your screen. If you can be bothered to take that, that's helpful feedback for us. It's a couple of minutes. If you can, that'd be great. If not, don't worry. Questions would be fantastic. Dave's happy to answer questions at the end of the talk. So if you can type them in the chat function, that'd be great. Anna will then feed them to me via my phone, and we'll get around to as many as we can at the end. If you've got any questions, that'd be great. A few thanks. I'd like to thank again Yorkshire Wildlife Trust for being such wonderful hosts. They've hosted us in past years physically in the flesh at the Living Sea Centre, which is just an absolute godsend for our live talks and things. This year, of course, not possible, but amazingly, they've hosted us online, giving us the capability and the platform to deliver what we are doing right now. Especially Anna, who is tapping away behind the scenes as we speak, and she's just been an absolute legend, start to finish. She's put so much work into this. There's films she's made, there's graphics she's made. She's like sorting out all the tech behind the scenes. She's just really shouldered the workload and done an incredible job. And if you see her out and about, thank her from all of us, because she's just been absolutely fantastic. Yorkshire Coast Nature, I'm not ashamed to big up, in fact I'm very proud to big up the small brilliant wildlife tour company that I work for, who've supported Migweek for years by providing t-shirts, by providing guided walks, by providing prizes, all kinds of stuff. Yorkshire Coast Nature, highly recommended. RSPB Bempton Cliffs, we're going to talk about that this evening, happy to say. Again, fantastic partners this year and every year. I feel like we're getting tighter as a community, actually, locally, and RSPB Bempton with Dave in place and with various other brilliant staff members and the team of ringers and birders and everybody up there. Yeah, as a hub, it's really just, I feel like it's growing and getting better all the time. And of course, last but not least, the very wonderful Flamborough Bird Observatory, who are, again, just, you know, making leaps and bounds regarding, you know, moving forward and inclusivity. And, you know, if you're a young person, you can get, you know, super cheap membership. The report's fantastic. The website's fantastic. Loads of people working really hard, completely voluntary, to make Flamborough Bird Observatory what it is and what it's becoming, which is a really great thing. Right, that's my waffle out of the way. It gives me a lot of pleasure this evening. It's our final talk, our final fifth talk of Migweek this is. And to close proceedings, I think in perfectly kind of suitable style is Dave O'Hara, who is the site manager at RSPB Bempton Cliffs, which is our magical seabird colony and more on the Greater Flamborough Head. And I could talk about it for ages, but that's not my place. This evening, happy to say it's Dave's place. And over to you, Dave.
Thanks very much, Mark. So yeah, first, just big thanks to Anna and Mark for organising this and all the work of Flamborough Bird Observatory as well. It has been a great week, and it's been great just to have all that communication going on about birds and migration. And you know, it's been a wonderful week with at Bempton, gold crests heaving out the bushes, redwings coming in over the sea into the berry bushes, and a few rarities around about. That lovely red flank bluetail today, lots of people enjoying. So I'm finishing off with talk about the seabirds at Bempton. and I'll try and share my screen of some pictures. Right, that's better. So yeah, in many ways, this is a talk of, I've said 50 years have changed. There was a monitoring really at Flamborough, Bempton, Filey. There was a little bit earlier than that, there was some monitoring and some counts of seabirds, but they were really got started about 50 years ago, especially. In more recent years, there's been a great team involved at Bempton, Flamborough, and now Filey in counting birds. And really, I'm filling in some ways tonight for Imogen Lloyd, who's been a big part of the monitoring for the last 3 years at Bempton and organising monitoring. And Imogen fantastically organised and carried out a lot of survey work of a limited programme we did this year under COVID restrictions. So big thanks to Imogen for her work, which has helped provide some up-to-date data and helped us not miss a year this year in terms of recording. So yeah, so the Flamborough Filey breeding seabird colony, it's now an SPA. It's about 20 kilometres of cliff from just south of Flamborough Head, over around past Bempton, up to Speeton Cliffs. There's a gap through the beaches there, and then around Filey Brig and the cliffs just north of Filey. Now, Filey was just added to the European protected area, I think about 4 years ago now. And again, it was recognised then as part of the same colony here on the east coast here. And a lot of that was down to the work of the previous site manager a few years ago, Keith Clarkson. And again, big thanks to all of Keith's work over the years in setting up some of the monitoring we now have, a really good programme of monitoring. So, seabirds and Bempton, Flamborough, Filey. Now this here is not a seabird that breeds at Bempton, Flamborough, Filey. This is the Manx shearwater. But just to say that the UK, in many ways, it's not important for a lot globally in terms of nature conservation. So somebody once said to me that really there's the estuaries and all the wading birds and shorebirds that come to winter on our estuaries, that is internationally, globally important around the British and Irish coast. There's also those bryophyte and liverwort-rich woods of the West Atlantic coast, which are again quite unique and special, globally important. And then there's the seabirds that nest around here. And the birds like Manx shearwater, something around about 75% of the world population around the British and Irish coast, often concentrated on very small areas, the majority of birds, I think, in Manx shearwater. You know, there's Rum and those famous Welsh islands, which really have the vast majority. So they're very vulnerable because of that. Now here at Bempton, Flamborough, we have 9 species of seabird breeding. You'll see 8 of them here. If we were in a normal talk, I'd see who could first point out the missing nesting seabird, but it is the cormorants, which just nest, there's about 25 pairs, I think, of cormorants nest north of Filey. But really it's these 9 species here: gannet, guillemot, herringull, shag, puffins, kittiwakes, fulmars and razorbills. And they all form part of this amazing seabird assemblage that we have. And they're here because of 2 things, I guess. These cliffs, which give them these fantastic nesting sites, with these ledges in the chalk of tiny little outcrops of rock which kittiwakes can cling to and build their nests, and the bigger ledges which guillemots line, and then the bigger ledges again which gannets are found on. Although gannets are now squeezing onto all sorts of places, it has to be said. And they have this great seabird assemblage all thronged in together. But it's not just the cliffs that mean that are why we've got these birds. It's also the seas around us. And this map here showing kittiwake distribution at sea. You can see that real hot spot just off Flamborough, Filey. where kittiwakes are using the sea there. It's because we have these cold upwellings, I think, coming down from the north, associated with the sea, the fisheries and the sandbanks offshore there, which are really important spawning grounds, provides this rich source of food for these seabirds. So the seabirds need to have food, most of them not too far away. And we'll talk a little bit about that later on. So yeah, seabirds in the North Sea, like everywhere, have a range of threats. Fisheries and fisheries management is a big issue for seabirds all around the world, and having sustainable management is critical going forward. Marine development, and particularly for us, wind farms which are developed not far offshore here, and the scale of them, and measuring the impacts and making sure that's mitigated against and adapted to protect our seabird populations. And also marine pollution, which comes in various forms. From traditionally we thought of oiling, and thankfully that seems to be becoming rarer in recent years. There still are instances though, but also plastics now, of course, are an enormous thing. And of course, there's just this sort of the waste in the sea, and the issues with birds tangling in sort of waste fishing lines and such like. And behind all of this, above it all, climate change and the changing seas. And this little picture here at the bottom of sand eels, they are really so critical for seabirds. These tiny little fish that burrow in the sand and breed in the sandbanks of the North Sea and all around the northern waters, and concern about how they are being affected in species at the southern edge of its range here in the North Sea. That is the fatter and oilier sand eel. There's concern that will be moving north, I think. But complicated stuff there with sand eels, and a real cause for concern. So we want to monitor to understand those population changes and changes in the marine environment. And then we have data which we use to influence decision making and lobby for improving the protection of the marine environment. So 50 years, and well, yes, like I said, there were some earlier surveys, but really seabird surveys really got going formally on a national sense with the 1968-71 really Operation Seafarer, which kind of was the first survey which tried to survey seabirds all around the coast of the UK and Ireland, and gave us a kind of bedrock of information. And there's been various national surveys which we've been part of since then, and our annual monitoring now, which continues right up to the present day. And this map here from the Operation Seafarer report there of kittiwakes very much shows our position here on the kind of southern North Sea breeding seabird populations, and how we're further north and really have Scotland as the key areas around the coast of Scotland, Orkney, Shetland, and we have all those great east coast colonies, and then going out to the Western Isles and St Kilda out on its own. So very much at the southern end of things. Now, here we have a few seconds of the sights and sounds of seabirds. So yeah, and that kind of thronging sort of beautiful noise of kittiwakes, auks, gannets, or sort of socializing away is such a magical thing and such a special thing for us all to be part of. And really, it's that sort of amazing, special wildlife. There's a few things really which we have in the UK which are that globally significant, but also just so wonderful as well. And a seabird colony is an amazing thing. And Bempton, Flamborough, Filey, it's right here on the edge of Yorkshire, so accessible to so many people. It's a really special thing. So in terms of monitoring it, we're here in a partnership to monitor the seabird colony. The aim is to count the whole colony every 5 or so years now. In the past, it was something between every 20 years to every sort of 10 years. And then those figures coming down in more recent years. But we aim to try and do a whole colony count every 5 years. And if it's a year or two out, you know, we're not doing too bad, but try to really keep a finger on the pulse of the whole colony, how it's going. But underlying that as well, there's annual productivity monitoring of study plots. And there we're looking in a lot more detail of how birds are performing in terms of how many chicks they're raising. And doing that annually is the critical thing, so that we're seeing the trends over the longer term and not just having, you know, an occasional glimpse of that, because that could be quite, maybe quite not give us quite the right picture. And then we have some other monitoring going on, which I'll tell you about as well, addressing some of the other key aspects of the ecology of the birds and the important things in terms of their conservation. And as I said, you know, it's a team effort, and there's really big number of local people involved in delivering this, from the Flamborough Marine Protected Area officer to various people involved with the bird observatories at Filey and at Flamborough, to local volunteers who've just been involved in different ways for years. And we also have our seabird officer based at Bempton each summer, usually with a full-time assistant volunteer role, and the team at Bempton get involved as much as we can as well in monitoring species. So looking at the full survey in 2017, it took quite a bit of work to get that accomplished, and it involved 6 people, 253 hours of time counting, so the equivalent of 30 days out on the boats, and patience, good weather, and boat availability. And that combination of having the weather and an ability to count is a really tricky thing. And it's one of the big problems for seabird surveying on sites like this, where you have to count a lot of it from the sea, and it makes it difficult. The whole cliff were sectioned up into about 45 segments, which were all counted by the teams out there on a boat, hopefully not rocking too much, but you know, really hard work and a lot of concentrated effort to get that data in. So these full colony counts between 1969 and 2017, we see really overall a positive picture of change in seabird populations. But there's one exception, and that's kittiwakes, which increased in numbers and then have declined, and although crept up a little bit, are still at lower numbers. So we have about 300,000 birds at the moment present at the colony in the summer, and that is a big increase in back into the late 60s, early 70s, and that increase in seabirds was being noted at that time. But really, seabirds were recovering from almost complete annihilation, and really populations have been really devastated through the overexploitation of the century before, and they are slow birds to recover. So the early protection of Bempton and Flamborough came about, I think, in 1869, that first Seabird Protection Act. And around that period, birds were being exploited for almost everything people could think of to exploit them for, from feathers to sport to eggs to plumes for hats, and wearing a kittiwake on your hat was a very fashionable thing to do. So we've moved on in very positive ways in many ways, and we've seen seabirds recover, but that doesn't mean that the future is certain by any means for them. Well, one of the great success stories are gannets. And gannets, I think, nested first, I think it was 1938 or 39, the first pair on its own on the cliffs. And it was a very, very slow increase for many years, but now the population has been kind of increasing really at quite a rate. And in 2017, over 13,000 pairs counted, and likely there are a few more probably 1,000 pairs than that now. And that sort of spectacle now of the gannets. Just the other day, Jeff Carr, one of our local volunteers, who counted, I think, 3,000 gannets at sea. And it's a population increase at Bempton, but also mirrored by a recovery across the other sites as well, including especially the Bass Rock up in the further Forth, which is really is becoming the biggest gannetry in the world now. And gannets are one of those birds where, again, 2/3 of the world population or so is around the coast of Britain and Ireland. So incredibly important, incredibly positive to see. So this table here, now this is a complicated one, so don't worry too much about taking all those figures, so we will be testing you later. But they're the detailed counts from 1969 through to 2017. And you will see that Filey, well, you can't quite see it very easy, but I can tell you that Filey has been added to those counts in 2017. And sort of 15 or 20,000 pairs of birds out on Filey, North Cliffs, important part of that population. There's some really positive stories, and there's also some concerning things as well. And certainly auks on the up is a really important story to see. Now this slide here, those little black dots, they're not midges squashed on your screen. They are the counts of guillemots and razorbills of individual birds over the survey periods. And you can see just the real significant increases in these two species around the coast here. And that is a really positive thing to see. And, that's where the complexities of the ecology of these species and adult survival and related to chick productivity factors we need to try and disentangle. But really positive to see how well they've increased. And razorbills especially are really a large, significant increase. So monitoring them manually, really the productivity is the core of it. We have study plots for 6 species, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But there's also a range of other factors which are trying to understand about the breeding seabirds. And there's the winter and pre-season kind of timing of and phenology of the breeding season. And we hope to look into more of that as we analyse the data we're gathering. Puffins are a tricky one, and we'll talk a little bit about how there's a new method to try and count them on the sea. We'll talk a little bit about the diet of auks and how that's the razorbills and guillemots. We'll try and look at that. And then that adult survival of kittiwakes is a project which is underway now through colour ringing. And finally, looking at the distribution at sea and some of the work that's been done on that as well. So to look at some of those things, guillemots they're all away now at sea into the North Sea, but they'll start to come back to the colony just in a few weeks' time, really. So completely absent for a few months, and then we start to see them more on the sea, and then they'll start to come in and go out again. And that's quite interesting because, the sea is still important for these birds throughout the year to a greater or lesser extent, quite close inshore. And for guillemots, it would have been nice to show a photograph of them on the sea, actually, because the key thing for guillemots is this rafting they do on the sea. And you just see the thousands of them in these sort of very social, gregarious rafts out on the sea, just below the cliffs and maybe a kilometre out, maybe a bit further sometimes, maybe a bit closer. And what goes on and between those guillemots out on those rafts, it seems it's a really important part of their social sort of engagement. And this graph here just shows you birds on the cliff early in the morning through the winter, and how in November we see really quite regular attendance, and then it seems to come in these pulses of 4 to 5 days, and then maybe a gap of a week or two, and then back again all through the winter period through to the end of February, and then in March they'll start to come back more regularly through to breeding in April. So for guillemots, they're away at the moment for a few months after they've finished nesting, but then they really are in and out of the colony through the winter. And that means we need to look after those seas offshore as well at this time of year. Now puffins, tricky ones, the puffins, because they nest in the crevices in the cliffs here at Bempton. they're quite difficult to know the numbers of. And in many ways, the surveys, we just had a very, very tenuous idea of how many are nesting, and it's very sort of anecdotal. Some days there's quite a few sitting on the tops of cliffs, and some days there aren't because they're disappearing into those crevices. And a technique developed, I think, in Scotland, is to count puffins on the sea before they nest. So they raft together, a bit like we were saying about the guillemots. So this social rafting in these flocks is probably the best way we can really get a handle on how many puffins we've got. And this has been tried in recent years, 16, 17 and 18. For the last couple of years, we've not managed to get counts. It's quite a tricky short window when the puffins are carrying, sort of rafting like this. And if it's rough at all, you can very easily miss it. And we need to have bodies as well involved. So hopefully next year we can get another full count. But we can see in 2018, there was over 4,000 puffins rafting on the sea off the cliffs. And yeah, that's really quite a significant population. And hopefully we can get better at carrying this out systematically in the future, sort of the end of March, early April, and get a good handle on how our puffins are doing that way. But then the annual productivity is the core of the summer monitoring each year. We have plots for these 6 species: kittiwake, guillemot, razorbill, herringull, fulmar and gannet. And this is where people have their adopted plots, which they'll go back to for years and years in many cases, and really get to know those ledges. And I've just had my toe dipped into this year and a little bit last year on gannet when I started. And you have your number your individual birds, which you think are part of individual pairs there with guillemots, like you can see these dots on this cliff face here. And then you try to see what's going on, and sometimes it can be a very frustrating job trying to work out. And you think, when is this bird going to reveal whether it's got an egg or not? And it can be quite a slow, laborious process. But you really get to know the birds and know the site, and it's a really rewarding thing, but often quite a long slog as well. So everyone who's involved in that really knows their birds and knows, often some long cold hours waiting for individual birds to shift and show what they've actually got. So yes, we're looking for eggs. And there's a kittiwake with 2 eggs, and sometimes they can be very easy. They sort of shift quickly, and sometimes they can be very slow. Most of the plots are about 50 birds, so and you have your recording sheet. And in the case of kittiwakes, you're going weekly to see what they're doing. In the case of guillemots, we're really going more frequently, every 2 or 3 days, really, because it's quite a short breeding season, and to try and find out what they're all sitting on it takes quite a lot of work. So you tend to, each time you'll get a certain proportion of them confirmed as having an egg or not, and then having a chick. And it's amazing how even when the chicks are quite large, how a guillemot can still sit on top of it without it revealing itself. But again, you see really sort of wonderful glimpse of the home life of these birds as well. So yeah, so looking at some of the results, fulmar, you can see, so they lay their single egg on their site, and really they've been ticking along at relatively sort of middling productivity, really. They're not low by any means, but they're not high either. And I guess this is often the case with long-lived birds like this. They have a low productivity annually, and they kind of have a long life to replace themselves. But still, we're seeing an up and down picture, but nothing disastrous there with fulmars. But they are a species of concern because they're a species that have declined considerably throughout their range, and a little bit here. Now gannets, while the population has been going up, this productivity seems to be sort of having a slight decline. Now we're looking at productivity monitoring really from 2009 for these species, when we first developed a sort of a rigorous standardized system across all these 6 species. And really that 0.8 or so, chicks of from each single egg. Fledging is about, good productivity. When you're getting down to below 0.7, although it's marginally not that much different, it's not great productivity for gannets really, because they are a species which do well. They've got a great capacity to find food. They're very big, strong birds that can seek out food. So really, when gannets go down to sort of half a chick per pair even, that's a sign of real problems in the food supply. So we have seen some worrying trends in gannets in recent years, but not too bad at all. And those gannet chicks, when they become these enormous fat googers on the cliff, they sort of lie there digesting their last meal. They are just wonderful things. And just the last 3 or 4 on the visible bits of cliff at Bempton were still sitting, waiting to fledge and join the rest of the fledged chicks this year. But most go really sort of through September is the main fledging period for gannets. But species we are worried about, and we're finding out from our monitoring work, are herring gulls. And the herring gull population has declined at Flamborough, Bempton, Filey, but also the productivity has been really quite low in recent years. And unlike the auks and the gannets and formers which only lay 1 egg, herring gulls can lay 2 or 3 eggs, and kittiwakes. And really, you would be hoping to see productivity over a chick per pair. That's still quite a lot of room for not being successful. So when you see them getting down to these kind of levels of just half a chick per pair, it's not great productivity at all. So this is where the data, if people weren't out spending the hours seeing what the birds were doing, we wouldn't really get that picture of solid factual data about what's happening. And it's quite concerning on the herring gulls. And in guillemot productivity, again, it's quite a narrow margin of change here, from 0.8-ish down to 0.6 really. But they are showing signs of some decline in productivity, and that will be interesting to see if that continues in the future. Is it a product of food supply or just increased population? Again, we'll see. But not probably an enormous concern when you look at productivity of guillemots on average across the range, but still one to watch, and maybe a pointer to future concerns. And there's a razorbill there, and again we see good data of a varied and probably sort of pretty standard productivity over this period. And again, what this does to the population, how many, this half a chick to 0.7 chicks fledge. Of course, those chicks then have to survive their first year or two. They're not breeding till they're 5 or 6 years old, probably most of these birds. So they've got to recruit to the adult population, and then it depends how long they live as how many chicks they need to produce to keep the population going. And that productivity, is related to food supply primarily as well. And that's quite tricky to monitor. But one thing with the auks, puffins has been a great project, the Pufferazzi, which has looked at puffins bringing in sand eels. Now that's not so easy at Flamborough, Bempton, because they just whiz into the cliffs and very rarely get seen with those beakfuls of sand eels. But we can see guillemots and razorbills coming in and see what they're carrying. Again, it's a work which is quite laborious and requires a lot of time, effort, because these birds can only, might only come in a couple of times a day, if that. And often it's early morning with a razorbill guillemot. They'll come in and deliver a fish. And you've also got to watch out for birds just coming in with fish which are kind of these display fish, which I think usually males come in to show off with on the cliff, and they might be young non-breeders who are just showing how great they are at catching fish. But so it requires a big effort, but that's something which has been done in recent years, this guillemot and razorbill diet. And this shows that the guillemots are bringing mostly sort of these clupid fish, sprat kind of fish, while the razorbills are very much specialising on sand eels. And I think this is similar on other seabird sites. I think it varies, especially what's striking here is how kind of, completely kind of marked the difference in the two species is. So that the razorbills are really specialising in sand eels, that key fish for many seabirds. And there's a nice photo of a kind of, I think that razorbill chick has got one sand eel just about sticking out of its beak, and a few more waiting to be shoved down there. So that is a lucky razorbill. And that brings on to kittiwakes. Now, kittiwakes are another sand eel specialist in terms of what they mostly bring in to feed the chicks. And we're seeing with kittiwakes really concerning low ongoing productivity. Now, this productivity for kittiwakes from 2009 by this standardized method, we also had data going back further, lots of really good kittiwake data from different plots though, back in the day through the sort of 80s and 90s. And really kittiwakes were nearly always fledging on, around about one chick per pair. There'd be the odd bad year, and then there'd be the odd good year with 1.3 or 4 chicks per pair. But in recent years, they've really been struggling, and that is probably one of the critical concerns, because the kittiwakes of Bempton are really the most important species in many ways. It's the largest kittiwake colony in the UK, just about. The sort of 50,000 or so pairs, really important population in the North Sea. And our productivity here reflects a wider trend to lower productivity, which is being measured around seabird colonies. And there's a scheme which the data which we gather here at Bempton, Flamborough, Filey feeds into the JNCC Seabird Monitoring Programme. And here we see that longer term data set for kittiwake productivity, and really a downward trend across sites. And that is reflected in a population decline as well. And we can see how really they're sort of half what they were, more than half, what they were sort of back in the sort of mid-90s there. And I think there's a bigger decline when you look back to the 80s in kittiwakes. So one of these seabirds, which we have this really important populations around the UK and Ireland waters, is in trouble at the moment. And we really want to look after them and try and support them. And looking at kittiwakes, especially, just present a little bit of some of the other data. There was an earlier count in 1964 around Flamborough, Bempton, and then 69, and there was a couple of attempts to count the colony through the 70s, especially 1975 was a really good and probably quite good count of the kittiwake population. Again in 79, and then 87, when there was over 80,000 pairs recorded then. There's almost, it really does suggest that there was quite a significant decline between 87 and 2000, and they've kind of been bobbling along at a lower population since then. So our concerns, we have this 9 years now of low productivity in kittiwakes, and it's not catastrophic failure, because they are fledging, one chick often, but they're not fledging. There's not many pairs fledging 2 chicks at all, and historically, there'd be the odd pair quite regularly fledging 3 chicks, and that is very, very rare indeed now. So we're seeing smaller clutches, but we're also seeing higher chick mortality. So for the people studying their plots, they'll have 2 eggs. The 2 eggs might hatch, and then somewhere in the period of the next couple of weeks, that one chick will disappear or die. And often you can see the sort of chick in the nest, it has died on the nest. So this might, point to 2 big issues. Are the females in poorer condition in the spring, laying fewer eggs, maybe poorer quality eggs, but then are there fewer sand eels for them to fish? Or is it that they're less available? And one idea is with warming seas that the sand eel might be swimming sort of deeper in the water. Another idea is that with stormier weather, it might be more difficult for kittiwakes to feed. And that's interesting when we think of the razorbills, which are doing so well. Maybe they have this greater adaptability, with diving and chasing their sand eels, which the kittiwakes don't quite have. So there's questions there. So understanding that effect of productivity on the populations of seabirds, there's a project underway at the moment, which Dave Aitken and Imogen Lloyd have been carrying out for the last 3 years, looking at kittiwake adult survival. And that's a colour ringing project where these are colour rings with readable, just about readable, if you've got very sharp eyes and a good telescope, a good camera, rings, allows us to see how many birds are returning. And it's been 3 years now that Dave and Imogen have been tagging birds, and we hope to continue that for another 2 years, and that will then give us a data set of it's around keeping the sample over 100 birds, and then we can start to see what the survival rate is in the longer term. So it's a long-term project, but it will be a critical bit of evidence and information in trying to gauge whether half a chick per pair can sustain a population or not. It's also worth saying that, you know, birds like kittiwakes, and they have the ability to raise more chicks so that they can respond to when there are crashes in adult populations as well. So they have that rebound ability, and that, you know, you see in many species across taxa really. And so lower productivity gives species less of a kind of cushion to respond when they have had higher, you know, sort of stochastic mortality, maybe due to some sort of freak event or weather-related factor or such like. And finally, in terms of the monitoring, annually there's 7 study plots which are counted each year, and they really give us a smaller snapshot of the wider full colony counts for kittiwakes, guillemots, and razorbills. And again, they show kittiwakes not showing any population decline on those study plots as yet, but still this lower productivity, it will take a while to feed through into the population. So we're not too sure if that could be coming shortly, and may well be. And guillemots and razorbills on the plots, just a sort of moderate increase. But maybe for razorbill, you can see that really there has been that trend again of increase over the last kind of 10, 11, 12 years now. And yeah, fantastic to see them doing well. And one of the wonderful sights around the coast here are these sort of bobbing sort of rafts of razorbills in the spring and summer, you know, just off the cliffs. They really are wonderful birds, and, you know, such a precious, special thing for us to see. So probably one of the final aspects is gannet and kittiwake tagging and tracking. So there was project work on this over the last sort of 7 or 8 years, maybe even a bit earlier than that, to find out a little bit more about the movements of birds at sea. So specialist operation with specialist help. You kind of wonder why he's not going for the closer bird there, but maybe I think that one might already have a ring on. But these seabirds, they're not looking too kind of alarmed really by having somebody approaching them with a small noose. And finding out about the birds' movements at sea, a lot of it's been connected with understanding what the impact of wind farm developments might be out at sea on the feeding areas of these birds. So they're fitted with tracking devices, and then they to be recaught to take those devices off again. And you can see this technique of marking birds so they can see which ones they've actually tagged, you know, which gives them these kind of Mohican dives, but they don't seem to mind that at all. And yeah, these devices probably becoming smaller as we speak, as the years go by, and more easy to attach. And this is a fantastic shot of a gannet looking slightly perturbed to have its tag fitted, but it's all been done for its own good. But you can see the handler there has got a really good pair of gloves on, and probably quite important to have them on when you're messing with a gannet. And that gives us fantastic information about the detail of what birds are doing out at sea. And you can see, you know, these kittiwakes tracking out sort of 30, 40 kilometers out to sea. And probably for a bird like kittiwake, you know, their kind of foraging range won't be much more than that, you know, to get back to relieve the other parent bird and to feed the chicks. And you can see how that's overlapping with wind farm developments and proposed developments. And again, this data is vital in helping us work with developers to make sure that the interests of seabirds are safeguarded with these developments, which are so important to make us carbon neutral, but shouldn't be done to the detriment of these internationally important populations, special birds. And this is this is gannets off coming from Flamborough, and really sort of going over quite an area of sea there on their daily foraging trips to find food. And then finally, this is just a little bit of data showing that global context again of kittiwakes, which were fitted with geolocators, and all the way over to off the sort of southwest coast of Greenland there, these kittiwakes were going over in the winter. And again, it just shows you that sort of international movement. Many of our seabirds are actually more confined to the kind of North Sea and the Norwegian Sea, and the young gannets go south to off the Bay of Biscay and then off West Africa. But these kittiwakes clearly a good proportion going over to off the coast of Greenland, off the east coast of Canada there on a regular basis. So this kind of information, we heard about it in the Motors talk on the Migweek talk earlier in the week. It's just this really fascinating, amazing information we can find out about birds and understand more about the mysteries of what's going on. So finally, I'd just like to say a really heartfelt and big thank you to all the counters who've been involved over the years. And it's helped create this information bank which can help us protect the birds into the future, and it's really appreciated. So that's all from me. I can stop sharing my screen and we can find Mark Pearson again somewhere. He will return.
Hi Dave, can you see me?
I see you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Splendid, splendid. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, completely fascinating stuff. You won't be surprised to learn that we've got a bunch of questions. If you're happy to answer a few for us.
Yeah.
I've got a load actually, but mine are at the back of the queue, so we'll forget about those for now.
Not too many from you, Mark. That'll be the tricky ones, I know.
Here comes a curveball, Dave. No, not at all. Mine was actually going to be, what's your favourite seabird?
Well, I think I've really because I did one of Imogen's study plots of guillemots this year.
Yeah.
They're just amazing things to watch, just the sort of behaviour of them, and you almost see the personality of these birds after a while. Some are kind of meek and, well, they seem to be that way, while others are feisty little beggars. Yeah. And they're real individuals, I think, so I'll big it up for guillemots, I'm afraid.
Yeah, absolutely love them. So we've got a few questions from Anne Deek. Thanks so much for being so involved, Anne, during every talk. It's great stuff. First one is, do you monitor fish populations at all?
No, we don't in terms of farm monitoring the seabird colony here. There is work which does monitor fish populations as part of the fisheries management, in IFCA, the inshore fisheries. And yeah, that would be something I would really like to know more about. But there is work going on every year to understand what that's involved in setting quotas and such like.
Yeah, gotcha. And also says, is it likely that Bempton is becoming the new chosen nesting site for birds previously breeding elsewhere?
Well, that's something which I should have probably explained. A lot of these seabirds, once they're nesting on a site, that's them for life. They really do that. They come back to their kind of square, not square footage, but maybe in a gannet, just about a square foot, but otherwise square set of centimetres of cliff to breed each year. But they do move about when they're young birds to a greater or lesser extent, and that's one of those things which we're still to find out more about. But I think with gannets, we've seen birds which have been ringed on other sites. I think one from one of the Channel Island gannetries is nesting on just above Staple there.
Wow!
And they do. The gannets look around other colonies in their first few years after they've come back, and those clubs of gannets we see at Bempton and will often be of birds, probably from the bass especially, which is the big nearby colony, but maybe other probably likely other colonies as well. And what proportion go back to the colony? I think with kittiwakes is the thing about, is it the, now I'll get this the wrong way round probably in this setting, but yeah.
We can edit it out, it's fine, mate.
Yeah, the males are coming back to the natal colony and the females are dispersing, or the other way around. I think it might be the other way around with kittiwakes, actually.
Right, gotcha. From Africa Gomez, have you tried to survey using drones?
Now, yes, that was a thing in the 2017 survey. That was one of the aims, to try and test that. So there was work done on that. But it was before my time a little bit, and I think it had problems. But that's one of those things which, the technology is improving all the time, and there will be potential in the future to try and bring that kind of technology in more to help support monitoring work. So yeah, that is a real opportunity in the future as these things become, I guess, the kind of capacity to get really good high resolution images easily. Right. I think improves. But yeah, it can be fraught with difficulties, drone footage of cliffs.
Yeah.
It works with smaller sites really well, but on a big scale, it's quite difficult.
Yeah, no, understood. Got an anonymous one via WhatsApp, not sure who this is from, but it's a really good one. What population, what percentage of the guillemots at Bempton are bridled?
Now.
Ouch.
Somebody can correct me on this. This would be a good one to correct me. I think about 1 in 20 of the guillemots at Bempton are bridled.
Really?
And yeah, so it's one of these things that increases as you go north, the bridle. So everyone knows, I think one of those slides had a bridled one in it. It's a lovely little white streak behind the eye, this bridle. And it's a nice thing though, isn't it? Because it really makes that bird distinctive, especially when 1 in 20 of them. So yeah, it's about 1 in 20, I think I'm correct, but somebody can text into.
Excellent. Okay. What else we got here? Fish populations, percentage of bridled. Another good question from Anne. Is there research, any research been done into wind farms becoming safer for the seabirds?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the kind of the work which has been with looking at the height, I think, of seabirds flying, and I think higher wind farms can have less impact. But it's not something I know a great deal about, and I think it's an ongoing kind of thing at the moment. But safeguarding the seabird populations is an important element of how the developments are set up and agreed areas for the wind farms to go. So gotcha. There's a lot of effort going into that to make sure it's as best as it can be.
Yeah. Another one from Africa just came in, a good one. Is there any evidence that gannets are displacing other species?
Well, there's lots of evidence of them displacing, of especially guillemots. So there's some amazing guillemot ledges which are now have a lot less guillemots on, because and you can see that actively on people's guillemot plots, that these sort of that bit you counted one year now has a couple of gannets starting to move in, but it hasn't sort of reflected itself in terms of the population. So that 2017 count of the guillemot population was there was 90,000 individuals counted, and it was significantly up on the 2000 count.
Right.
And the gannets had gone up in that period. So I think there'll have to be a bit of redistribution. But that's an interesting thing with this site fidelity, because those guillemots will be coming back to their ledge to find a gannet on it, or the gannet will be turfing them off. And that's how long will they kind of try? Well, they can't really argue with a gannet very easily. So they need to stand the boxes in,
do some serious security. Brilliant. Dave, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for all that. It's been really fascinating, an amazing kind of insight into what's happening at Bempton. And hopefully, what I would say also listening to your talk is that as a RSPB volunteer surveying part of the Filey colony, I would recommend it to anybody watching this who is who lives in the area and who cares about our seabirds, I'm guessing that you always need more volunteers for the seabird monitoring. Is that correct?
Well, in principle, definitely, yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
I know right now it's awkward, but I mean, yeah, for the raisable plots and the kittiwake plots and things.
Yeah, and I think things, finding more ways for people to be involved. I think that's a really good point, Mark. In the future, we want to, and things like that. The puffin. What was it called again? The Pufferazzi project.
Right. Yeah.
A fantastic thing, because as well as involving people with their photographs they were taking of puffins with fish, it was also a great publicity thing as well. There's elements of that, so that citizen science element of monitoring is
right.
Is really important. For many of the plots, keeping those people, we're hoping that people who weren't able to do their plots this year, really,
I really missed it. I must admit. Yeah, I really missed it. It's funny how it becomes a part of your summer. Spring migration kind of ebbs away, and you're like, well, it's okay. I got the kittiwakes, and then the waders will be back, and so on. It becomes part of your birding calendar, So we're looking forward to hopefully resuming next year, of course. Wonderful. Thank you, Dave. So if people do want to get involved, volunteer, they can get in touch with you at Bempton just via the usual channels, right?
Yeah, definitely. Me, David Aitken at Bempton. And that'd be really appreciated. Anyone who's interested. Great,
thank you. I've got a message, a really nice message from Craig, as chair of Flamborough Bird Obs. Vaguely embarrassing to read out, but Craig says, not a question, but without embarrassing you, and since I can't read the following, as chair of Flamborough Bird Obs, really could you please pass on huge thanks to all involved in making this year's Migweek such a success despite such constraints. Special thanks to Anna, of course, the ringing team, our sponsors, Yorkshire Coast Nature, Yorkshire Wildlife Trust and the RSPB, and all our speakers who've covered such interesting topics. I second that, Craig, completely. And of course, many thanks to yourself. Thank you for many hours work you put in. All should be proud of such a great collective effort. Great stuff from Craig. So yeah, thanks a lot for that, Craig. It's fair to say that we've all loved it. It's just been an absolutely brilliant team effort, as it always is, Migweek. A lot of fun, really educational, constructive, inspiring. What's not to love about it? Frankly, it's just been really, really great. And I hope everybody watching, not just tonight's brilliant talk from Dave, but our other talks and all the other brilliant stuff on the website, I hope it's enabled you to feel like you're still kind of with us on the coast, and you're still part of our collective migration adventure, which is what it is. Let's face it. And yeah, it's just been an absolute blast. Unfortunately, that's it for this year. It's been a really great week. It's been really great seeing people out and about this week. But next year, hopefully, all being well, we'll be back with a vengeance, in the field, in the flesh, in the raw. And there's already people asking, when we're on. There's already volunteers lining up to give guided walks. We're already looking at what talks we're going to do. We're already looking at the online presence as well as the physical presence. So we're already genuinely excited about next year, even though it's such a long way away. It's great to have this kind of stuff to look forward to. I hope I speak for everybody, certainly myself, where that's concerned. And yeah, okay, it's a long time till next year, but hopefully it'll fly by. And, we look forward to welcoming all you folks out there who are part of our wider community back to the wonderful, wonderful Yorkshire coast and its magic migration. Thanks everybody. Thanks especially to Anna for all the hard work. Thanks for everybody for the support and amazing messages, which are just absolutely ploughing in over the last few days. And we will miss you, and have a bearable winter. Enjoy your birds, and we'll see you again very soon. Thanks a lot, everybody. Cheers, Dave.